Well, I'm just going to take a few minutes. First of all, I missed your first meeting. I was out of town, but let me first say thank you for agreeing to serve on this. I think it's a very important committee. Also, y'all will be looking today at some of your bylaws and things of this nature. It took a while for me to convince the city council that this needs to be formed. And the reason of that is looking at Little Rock of what they do in their commission and how they do that. You're going to be touching a lot of things. You're going to be looking at a lot of land. You're going to be, in the long run, providing homes to people who need homes. There's going to be several things that y'all will be doing in your bylaws. So one of the things I would suggest to you do, and I think we sent out an email, if not, it'll be going out, to go and listen to the, I believe, Jonathan, has that email gone out about the trip to Little Rock?
Yeah, we're going to talk about it a little more.
Okay. And then Miss Joan, I call her Miss Joan, has agreed. She's actually started the one there on City Council Little Rock. She's agreed to whoever goes to ask questions after their board meeting for an hour or so to really get down in what I call real down in the deep part of why and the definition of a land bank and its purpose and mission and vision. So that's something that I look forward to, and I'm going to go to that and change my schedule, and we'll provide transportation down there and back. The one thing that I want to say to you is I learned from Little Rock is to go slow, be very methodical on this, because this is something that will be great for the city of Jonesboro. But my suggestion would be, like Little Rock, is that you look and you're going to identify one or two, maybe possibly three or whatever areas of concentration that you want to work on within the land bank within that area of town. So I just want to say to you, let's make sure that we do it correctly. I know you will, and but I'm just giving you some things and thoughts that came from me from Little Rock. They didn't start overnight and get everything going, and now they're very large, and obviously this department probably will grow to where we'll have to hire more employees in the future once we get it going. But I say this to you is that make sure you look at the areas of concentration that you want to look at within this city. Every one of you all will probably have a difference of opinion on what areas of town that you want to look at, and that's great. But I think as a consensus of the committee that you will want to pick one in primary, possibly a two alternative or something like that to look at, and then really concentrate and use this commission to work in that area so we can get something done for our citizens of Jonesboro. So again, I just want to say thank you, and appreciate very much you all agreeing to serve on this, and look forward to working with you. Okay? Thank you very much. Okay? I'll let
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
you bet.
Move on to item 1, roll call.
All right. Commissioner Durham,
Present.
Commissioner Hurden. Here. Commissioner Hollywood,
Present.
Commissioner Martin,
Present.
Commissioner Mills,
Present.
Commissioner Moore,
Present.
Commissioner Osment,
Here.
Dr. Warner, I believe, is absent, and Commissioner Zolper.
Here.
All right.
Item 2, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Item 3, approval of Thursday, May 17, 2018 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected. There are a few typographical errors, which I'll send to Jonathan. Other than that, I made no further observations other than some typos.
Dennis, motion to approve the minutes with adjustments. Do I have a second?
Second.
Item approved. Move on to the 4th item, old business. To review the Land Bank Commission bylaws, these documents needs to be forwarded to the council for their approval.
All right, so I had a discussion maybe a week or so ago with Dr. Warner about this agenda. He wants us to go ahead and try to get our bylaws approved at this meeting and forwarded to council. The problem, or I guess the issue that we may run into, is our priorities and policies, which you'll see as item B, is actually incorporated into our bylaws. So what you'll have to do if you approve these bylaws, you'll have to approve them with the condition or a stipulation in there that allows us to bring our policies and priorities back before the council at a later date. So without that condition, I don't think we need to approve the bylaws right now because we haven't had a chance to look over our priorities and policies. So whoever makes that motion, if you're okay with what you're looking at in front of you, please consider attaching that. And I have received feedback on the bylaws. I've made those suggested changes, which is why you got a new copy. So the copy that I provided you originally in your binder will be a little outdated. So I gave y'all guys a new copy with the agenda and the minutes.
Jonathan, was there anything significant changed?
No, not pertaining to the bylaws. Now, there could be a few significant changes in our policies section, which is why I'm suggesting that we make a condition that we approve the bylaws with the understanding that we can go back and change these policies and procedures at a later point.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the bylaws subject to the provisions referencing the priorities and policies will be reviewed and approved at a later date.
Okay.
Do we have a second to this motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mills.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay.
Motion passed.
Mr. Zofer. And
Move on to item 5, new business. We have the Land Bank meeting in Little Rock, which they normally meet the third Wednesday each month.
hate to interrupt. We skipped over B. Under old business, the reviewing of the priorities and policies.
Thank you.
I've actually got a small
Presentation.
presentation I'm going to try to get into. Let me. So this is, Dr. Warner asked me just to run through this document. This is going to be section, I think, 8, if you look in your bylaws that y'all recommended to go to council. This will be coming straight from section 8. Obviously, we couldn't incorporate this entire document into our bylaws just because of the spacing in there, but we got a snapshot, if you will, in our bylaws, and then our actual document goes a little more in depth. So we're going to just hit the high points throughout this document, and if y'all have questions, feel free to stop me. Anything past this point is subject to change based off y'all's professional experiences or y'all's expertise. I'm open to any changes. So as we get to it, if y'all guys have a suggestion, just let me know, or you can email it to me after the meeting and we'll make those changes. So as you're aware, at this point, the City Council back in December approved the creation of both the Land Bank and the Land Bank Commission, Ordinance 17083. In that ordinance, they defined our policies and procedures, our priorities and policies, if you will, as the Land Bank Redevelopment Plan, which if you can read that, it's a policy guide for acquisition and conveyance of land bank commission properties, giving consideration to city zoning, parks, land use, and neighborhood action plans. So obviously we have an existing planning and zoning department. We've got a parks department. If you look on your packet that I gave you, some of you may already have a land use map, but if you don't, I provided you one. And then what's known as a neighborhood action plan, which is something we're going to have to get into once we establish a focus area, right? But that's how the ordinance that was approved by council defines our policies and procedures going forward. So as it currently stands, it has 7 sections: property acquisition, property disposition, factors in determining consideration due upon transfers. So how much are we going to sell it for, essentially is what that's saying. Your side lot program, land transfers, and your donation policy, and then you got a definition section. So as it's worded now, as the mayor was talking about earlier, it's recommended, and as it's written right now, we say we're going to focus our resources in a specific area, right? So It says the commission shall give priority to properties located within that focus neighborhood. Once we select the focus area, there are, I believe, 15 factors that we're going to be able to look at. I only put 7 or 8 on here just because of the room, but it goes more in depth. If you actually look at the document that's in your binder, it'll go in more in depth and cover those. So once we select a focus area, we're going to be able to go in and accumulate property, right? So the question is, what are we going to be using to justify that, right? Well, we've got 15 justifications in this document that if y'all guys want to add more or take away, we can do that. Some of those will be city liens, requests by nonprofit corporations such as Habitat, or even a private developer, maybe government entities such as our Park and Recs, or maybe engineering needs to do a drainage project. So we can go in, once we have a focus area, we can use this list of 15 considerations to justify why we're bringing that lot into the land bank. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, there's a little more on the list. I just put some of the first ones there just because of the space on the PowerPoint. But if y'all have more questions about it, just shoot me an email. So then the next question becomes, once we're accumulating property into the land bank, our ultimate goal is to sell it. We want to get rid of it. We don't want to have it in the land bank forever. So we're going to have to ask 3 questions when we get to that point where we're trying to sell property. What do they want to do with it? Who wants to buy it? And how is it going to impact our plan going forward? And essentially, there's a little more in the next slide that gets into those areas. So intended use, what do they want to do with this? Well, we've got a list of 13 things that we will approve selling property for. They can be affordable housing. They can develop affordable housing. They can support home ownership, single family housing. They can do a PUD development. We can even do commercial. We can do rental housing. But then you have to go to the second part of that. Once we figure out what they want to do, we'll go to the second phase, which is who is wanting to buy it. You'll look at, is it a homeowner? Is it a nonprofit developer? Is it a for-profit developer? Is it a corporation? Is it a tax-exempt institution? Once you've addressed that issue, then you'll look at the third step, which is how is that going to impact our neighborhood action plans going forward. Right now, obviously, being a new committee, a new department, we don't have neighborhood action plans specifically designed for any really area of town. The closest we got is our land use plan. We'll work with Daryl. Once we decide where we want to focus our resources, we'll get with the planning staff, engineering, or whoever we need to get with, and we'll work with a neighborhood plan going forward. So then you can ask these 3 questions, and it'll make your decision easier when you have an individual or a developer or a corporation that comes before us and they want to buy a piece of property. You can ask them, what do you want to do? We can look at their history as an individual or as a corporation, and then we can see how it's going to impact our plan going forward. And then we'll use that information to base our decision on and recommend that to council. Does that make sense? Okay. So here is one. I've talked to 2 or 3 commissioners about this without going too in depth. How much can we sell the properties for? Well, that's going to be determined on a case-by-case basis by y'all guys. We can look at whatever factors y'all want me to look at. We can find whatever information y'all want, but ultimately it's going to be y'all's decision. As it is currently written, and this is why we may want to go back, one of the areas we may want to change, as it's currently written, we can only sell properties for no less than $1,000. It may be beneficial to us going forward to have that ability to donate property or to sell it for less than $1,000. We've, I guess, had contact or spoke with individuals, nothing really official, where there could be some projects in the future through our land bank, but they don't want to purchase the properties for anything. They want to have it donated in exchange for the development that they want to bring. And this does not allow us to do that. So if y'all want to change that going forward, that may be something that we consider doing. And then if y'all guys decide not to change it, obviously the rest of it says you're going to look at the fair market cost and the property costs that we've occurred over time, and then we'll set the selling price somewhere in the middle. So property costs being how much did it cost us to get the property, how much has it cost us to maintain it, how much did it cost to repair. We'll look at that, we'll look at fair market value, and hopefully sell it somewhere in the middle. Make sense? Okay. And then this is this is a program that Little Rock had a lot of success with. I'm not sure if we'll have a ton of success here. We'll have a few. But with Daryl's new zoning and for smaller lots, that may take care of some of this issue. But essentially what it does is it allows somebody who's living next to a undevelopable side lot to go in and essentially purchase it from us and kind of incorporate it into their existing lot. And there'll be obviously some residential qualifications, and both on the land side and both on the individual wanting to purchase the property as well. For example, it'll have to be undeveloped. It'll have to not be big enough to put a house on. There's a list of things if you go down through there that you can look at. And then obviously on the individual side, they have to live next to the property. They have to hold title to that. We'll go through that list as well. And we'll look at that before we ever make those decisions. Any questions?
I do have a question on that. If there is a acquisition of a lot that's been platted, this may be for you or Daryl since he's here today, would it require replat by the owner?
I
Wait,
would,
a lot?
I would
One lot?
say so, just because especially if it's too small to develop, it would just make sense to replat it into one lot so that it would make things easier when you come forward for a building permit in the future or for whatever reason. But I would say that would be a decision. Daryl, I would rely on Daryl on that if he says yes, and then obviously that would be y'all's decision as well. My recommendation would be to have them replat it. I'm sure going forward, there could be a situation where we decide that that's probably not in the owner's best interest. But again, we can make those decisions on a case-by-case basis.
Jonathan, the reason I asked that was more towards this transfer shall include a deed restriction. If it's going to be a replat required, I don't know exactly what kind of deed restriction we're talking about. Do you have an idea from Little Rock as to what they refer to or as restricted?
I don't have a specific example from them. I can look through some of the paperwork that he gave me to see if that's something that is in there. I doubt it. I would recommend you ask that question to Joan in Little Rock. Mm-hmm. She's probably more familiar with that. And obviously, us being new, we'll get familiar with it over time. But I don't know. I know the reason why you want to put those restrictions on there is if you look through there, it says, you can't do certain things and whatnot. The only way we would have any control over that is to put that restriction in there so where if they go in, 2-3 months later and they say, well, it's just going to be undeveloped, but really they wanted that side lot for a pool, or they wanted the side lot so they could put a storage building there. We can go back and look at that restriction and say, hey, we sold this to you so it could be an additional lot for grass, green space, or what have you, and you put a pool in. That's not okay. So we can use that deed restriction to kind of monitor how they handle it. But as far as your question, I would go with Joan, and then we'll go forward from there.
It's fine. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, and this is continued as a side lot program. They should be sold at no less than $1,000. In the event that we have a side lot that has two adjoining property owners that want the same piece of property, as it's currently written, we'll have a bid, and that bid will be open and public, and we'll give it to the highest bidder. Seems fairly simple to me. All right, so land transfers. When we're doing this, they can't have no outstanding citations from a state or local violation. They can't have any delinquent property taxes. They shall be structured in a manner that allows the city to enforce certain requirements on that development, right? It must be consistent with our zoning requirements, and it has to comply with our plan, which going forward, we'll start working on that as soon as we identify a focus area. All right, and so now the last section is property donations, right? And so we may not want to take in every single property that's presented to us for various reasons. This is going to help us determine what properties we accept as donations and what properties we decide not to take into the land bank. And it says here, obviously, if you have an environmental issue, you have to, before we'll ever consider it, you have to have a solution for that issue before we'll bring it in. Properties with immediate maintenance requirements, they have to have a funding source. Commission will determine the value, but we can't, that's one thing that I ran by Bill and a couple of others. We can, in the event that we do get a property donation, we can provide them with a letter that says, hey, thank you for your donation, but we're not allowed to tell them how much or provide them with a letter that says your property's valued at $5,000, thank you for the donation. They have to do that themselves. So we'll provide them with a letter saying thank you for your donation, and we'll give them the specifics of that, but we're not allowed, I forgot the accounting term, but we're not allowed for some accounting reason to give specifics of how much they're donating. And then obviously y'all have the right to refuse any donation based off the information that I provide you guys. And so getting to that point, that's the last step. We get a donation, an individual come in, they'll fill out the application, and essentially in the future, staff will complete this analysis. We'll look at the fair market value, environmental concerns. We'll check for outstanding liens or title issues. We'll go and we'll look at if it's a structure. We'll look at maintenance costs, whether that's demoing the property and whether it's a vacant lot and we have to mow it, ongoing cost, and the condition of the surrounding neighborhood. You'll be provided, those of you who are familiar with the Planning Commission or have seen the rezoning packets or the staff summaries, you'll essentially be provided with a staff summary that's very similar to that answers these questions here. And you'll use that information again to determine whether or not you accept or deny the property donation. And let me see, I think that's the last one on this. Yes, questions or suggestions? You guys have any feedback, any thoughts?
When I was discussing doing research in regards to liens and title issues, I don't know, it seemed like we talked about this maybe once before, but in regards to how we're going to determine, is there a certain title company that we're going to use or that the city already has any type of contract with or that we'll use in the future?
Code enforcement, with some of the work that they're doing, they already have title searches done. I forget the process. It may be with their condemnation process or something. Anyway, the point is they already work with an existing, they've got a deal worked out with, I forgot the name of it, but yes, we've already got a title company that the city, the code enforcement department works with. I've talked to them. Obviously, we haven't done any searches yet or anything like that. So, but I've talked to them, and I think they're going to be willing to give us the same sort of discounted work that they give code enforcement. So I would assume that we would want to go with that because it'll be cheaper for the city. I can get you those details and specifics after sometime this afternoon about how much it costs and what we use.
Will we use a realtor?
Little Rock does to some extent. For example, one of their big things they do is they partner with developers or CDBG funding or what have you. And where we may look at more vacant properties or more properties that have been demoed, Little Rock has a lot of properties that they go in and they rehab. So they actually take possession of a piece of property, whether they bought it for $30,000, they put in $40,000 worth of improvements, and then they try to sell it for $70,000. They have a house there, it's been newly remodeled. Those are the types of situations where they might list it with a real estate firm. I know last time I was down there, they took me to a house that was listed with an agent. I don't think we're going to do that on a we can do it on a case-by-case basis. I don't think a vast majority of ours will be.
I just everybody in here knows realtors and have friends that are realtors. It'd just be, I don't know how we could do that, but maybe get requests for proposals and the firm that comes in with the best deal for the city, then that eliminates all the,
Yeah, there's already a well-established bid process within the city. If it comes to, competing interest from different real estate agents, we can take it through the bid process to make it fair.
Well, I know the city attorney, if you look in the, if anybody has that binder from last time, we have the offer and acceptance of the real property on the back, so I'm sure the city attorney will handle it.
Yeah, a majority of it's going to be held by
Right.
staff.
the second thing is like, I know that I develop property, but developers have a tendency to overpromise and underdeliver a lot of times. So if the whole idea is we're going to make somebody a deal on a piece of property and they're going to bring the neighborhood up, I don't know what your mechanism or just, I hope we can build some kind of mechanism in or way that we have the authority to basically be really intentional in our approval of what they're going to do and hold them to it so they don't get a deal and then come in there and just throw something in that completely, defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do.
Well, addressing that, so where the land bank's unique in compared to, let's say, the planning commission or even the city council, what makes y'all unique is whenever y'all are making a decision, y'all are required, we're required to see what's going there. So, for instance, a rezoning, for example, that everybody's familiar with, a lot of times they'll come through and they want to rezone it to multifamily. Everybody knows it, but nobody can ask, hey, what do you want to put here, right? Well, that's the complete opposite of what y'all have the opportunity to do. We're the owners of the property. They're going to get before y'all guys, and y'all guys should and y'all will ask, hey, what are you putting here? And then they'll show you the development. They'll essentially present a site plan. I'm going to work with them to try to, as much as possible, get the paperwork in order. So essentially the same paperwork that you're going to see will be the same paperwork they need to apply for a development permit, a building permit. And so y'all will be able to hopefully look at site plans, drawings, elevations, and y'all will make those decisions. And then when you approve the sale, this goes back into what, and Dennis as an attorney probably knows more about this than I could, but you can put, and Carol and Jessica will help us, we can put these restrictions in there that say, we've agreed to sell this to you. You're going to build this development that we've approved. And I think we said you have to build it within 3 years is what the document says. And then they can come before the commission and ask for an extension if we see that progress is being made, but maybe they're having a funding issue or whatever. We can provide them, I think, with up to a year extension, which would then give them 4 years to develop the project that we approve. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Well, and I'm sorry, were you next?
Go ahead, Jerry.
And I guess my question is there any recourse as far as kind of what Ray was leading up to? Say I come in and I promise to put a brick exterior on a building that I'm going to develop, and I turn around and put siding in instead. Is there any recourse by the commission or us for anything like that? Or is it, that might be a question for Dennis. Would that be?
I would say we hold them, I guess if we want to hold them to a higher standard than what our building codes suggest, right? So, right now you can put siding in if you want, you can put brick in. If we want to just say absolutely no siding, I guess we could do that, and there's probably a legal mechanism that we could. My default answer is, hey, we've already got codes established that allow for development, right? So let those codes kind of govern siding issues or what kind of material they're going to develop with. And if we want to get restrictive or hold it to a higher standard, we can put it into the contract.
Jonathan, does Little Rock use the 3-year time frame? That
Yes.
seems like a long time. We sell something to somebody and then it sits there and, the whole purpose is to improve it. And
Yeah.
so.
To answer your question, yes. A lot of these documents we essentially got directly from them, and then we tried to tailor it to our city. We can change those 3 years if y'all want to whatever time period y'all feel like y'all want. I would say you don't want to, if a developer is willing to work with us in some of these areas and on some of these projects, understand we want to get it done right now as quickly as possible. But if we find an individual that wants to work with us, the last thing I want to do is make them feel time constrained or restricted. I think it's not going to be an overnight process anyway.
Yeah.
And those of you familiar with a development project, it could take a year or 2 years. whenever you build something anyway.
You just don't want someone to drag their feet.
Yeah, and if we see that, they're dragging their feet, as staff, we can talk with them and we can do things outside of the commission. We're here Monday through Friday anyway. We can talk with these developers and work with them. But ultimately, if they're dragging their feet and we see this over time, whatever period of time y'all establish, if they come and apply for an extension, y'all can easily say no. And we can list, hey, you've had 2 years or you've had a year. Staff has documented all these different times where we've talked to you and tried to warn you to speed up the process and work with you. And I can provide that information at that point. But we can change the number to whatever.
I mean, I'm sure within the process of selling that they'll provide us a time frame too.
Yeah.
Probably.
And that's one thing. Maybe for a house, yeah, you can get it done in a year. But if we ever get to the point where there is a multi-family senior citizens housing center or a commercial project,
Yeah.
those may not be completed in a year.
Right.
It may take 2 years for that whole entire development to be built out. And if you set it at 2 years, I don't want to be sitting here at the last month worrying if we're going to violate the stuff that we approved just over a month. And I think that's why they set it at 3.
I foresee, as far as this commission is concerned, that we probably will, on large-scale developments, and we'll have to take that as a case-by-case basis, but may even enter into actual development agreements with the developer and the city concerning what they intend to do and how they intend to do it and over what time period they intend to do it and whether they have financing or they don't have financing and all those kind of niceties. As Ray being a developer, you have a whole bunch of hurdles to overcome in any project. The other thing I'd like to mention to the commission to think about is the minimum of $1,000. That's currently in our priorities, policies and procedures. I've talked to Jonathan about this. I'm not really in favor of that. I'd like to have us have as much flexibility as possible. So if there is some need to give somebody some property, we can do it. We're not handcuffed by our own rules. The reason I say that is, say for instance, you have a Habitat for Humanity. Well, they could buy it, sure, but their job is to provide homes for low-income people who actually get out there and work to help build the home. And if they can save money, that's good because they can build more homes. That may happen more often than we think, and I hope it does. We also could have churches who wish to. We've been talking about homeless and homeless shelters. Do we want to, charge somebody even $1,000? I just think it's better if we have some flexibility, and that's my own personal opinion, just for y'all to think about. But that's one reason. I'm not a big fan of that.
And again, this stemmed from what Little Rock does, right? It can be changing. I reckon, it's my opinion, we change it because like I've said, and nothing in concrete by no means, but just in passing with developers and different individuals on projects, they would like to have that flexibility there. And when you say shall not, you have to sell it for $1,000. We're going to run into an issue, I think, in the future where maybe we lose out on some things over that. I don't know. To me, $1,000 seems, if you're selling it for $1,000, and
Seems like a pretty good deal.
yeah, but
And that's $1,000 per parcel.
Yes.
So if you're talking 30 lots on a large-scale development, that's $30,000, still cheap.
Yes.
But again, we give things away now to get people to come to cities
Sure.
and to states.
my
It's a
opinion,
fact of life.
just to avoid the headache and any future issues that may come up, it's just $1,000. We can take it away if y'all guys want to. Little Rock does it just because.
They're Little Rock.
I think pairing it together with the first part of the development agreement, I think if I come in and say, hey, I want to buy this for, it's a deal, whatever, and I want to build brick apartments on it, and the commission's looking at it, and they're like, and Jeremy comes in and says, okay, and he's got a site plan, and it's really detailed, and it's really nice, and he's got a plan that's all put there. in my mind, I think the development agreement would be good. Speaking to the first part of what you said, I think that would weigh on the commission heavier on our decision on who we're going to let have the property, because if this person's got a very detailed plan that's very specific about the materials and what they're going to put into it, I think that's going to weigh into our decision on whether we're going to sell to whoever. And secondly, I see your point. If somebody's going to go pour a ton of money into a great project and you got to give them the land and it's somewhere nobody else is even thinking about doing anything, I see the benefit that it's insignificant, the revenue to the city, really, if they're really going to do something that's really going to help a neighborhood that's really struggling. So,
And you got to keep in mind too, I've talked to individuals and they say, as far as the private developer side of this, why would we purchase a piece of property and then just give it to a private developer? Why don't let that dude just go in and buy his own property, right? And the response I have to that is private developers, no matter what the size of the project, at some point their funds run out. They can only go to a certain point on their funds. Whereas the city, maybe we purchase a piece of property, let's just keep it easy. Maybe we purchase it for $10,000 and we end up selling it for nothing, or we give it away, right? And on the front end, it looks like we're losing $10,000. But where you look at on the back end is that increase in tax revenue or the permit fees. I'm not sure if anybody's ever applied for a commercial permit or whatever, but you're going to recoup that money through your permit fees and through your tax revenue. Now, I'm not advocating to just give away all of our properties, right? That's y'all's decision. But I think if it's just $1,000 and it's going to prohibit a development, let's take it out.
And we're also going to be targeting areas that need development. That's part of our mission. We're not going to be selling property on Main,
Right.
that type of thing. We're going to be acquiring property in areas that are not all that attractive, maybe, for the private development or public development for that matter.
Jonathan, who will monitor the projects to make sure they're meeting the qualifications that we have out there?
Well, right now you're looking at them. I will. That'll be the staff, and hopefully I'll be able to work out some sort of partnerships with maybe our inspections, because they're going to be going to development projects anyway with the building permit. Well, let me start over by saying inspections and looking over developments is not anything new. We currently have a building and development process. The question is, are they building it according to what we approved, right? So I'll work with our inspectors, and eventually, as the mayor pointed out, we will hopefully get to the point where we'll have additional staff that can help with this type of stuff. Right now, obviously, we haven't really got up and going. So I should be able to handle that. But the staff will, to answer your question, whether that's the land bank or our inspections or whatever, we'll work it out to where the staff handles that. And if there's any violations or anything, we'll present it to y'all before we make any decisions. But I think that would be the easiest way to go, is we work with inspections anyway on a daily basis with our permits and whatnot.
Well, one concern I had was if you have the 3-year timeline of being able to start the project, which I fully understand, and then they could possibly extend it one more year, that exceeds our terms on the commission.
Yeah. and to answer that question, Planning Commission, for example, can go in and approve a period of time where somebody doesn't have to pave a parking lot, for example. And they approve them, hey, 2 years, you can keep it chat for 2 years. After 2 years, you got to have it paved, right? So again, it's not anything that commissions aren't doing now. They'll give permissions for chatted parking lots versus paved parking lots. They'll give waivers on maybe sidewalks or whatever. And you can go back at that period of time and say, hey, we gave you 2 years to get your parking lot chatted. It's not chatted, so now what do we want to do about it? So it's not anything new as far as putting restrictions or conditions on certain things. Hopefully that doesn't ever happen. We don't have that situation, but planning for it, the staff will take care of it and present it before y'all guys if it ever happens, for y'all to make a decision. And what we'll do is we'll print off the paperwork that shows the thought process in that meeting, this minutes, the deed restrictions or whatever, the site plan, and we'll present it to y'all and say, hey, this developer's not building according to the site plan. Here's what's wrong. And then the existing commission, whatever time period that is, will be able to make a decision based with that information.
Thank you. Any further questions or concerns?
Yeah, we need to move on because I'm trying to get y'all out of here in an hour and we're there, so.
Move on to item 5, new business. Land Bank meeting in Little Rock. The commissioners meets the third Wednesday of each month at 12 p.m. Correspondence have been sent. Move on to item B, review the potential areas of focus for the land bank resources, presented by Mr. Smith.
All right, so going back to the Little Rock meeting real quick, I'm going to stay down here because of this, but going back to the Little Rock meeting, the mayor obviously has already addressed some of it. We would like for as many of y'all to go as possible. We originally wanted to have Joan come down here for the first meeting, the orientation. Scheduling conflicts and whatnot kept coming up. So we was able to work it out to where she's going to have a period of time after our meeting on Wednesday to ask and answer any of y'all's questions that y'all think of. Anything that y'all want to ask, she's willing to answer. She knows what she's doing, and she's been doing it for years. So she's a really good source of information. The mayor's going to provide transportation. We'll meet here, and then we'll head out. I will send, once I get a list, I know a couple of our guys aren't going to be able to go already, but once I hear back from everybody, we'll determine, are we taking a bus or how the transportation is going to go, what time we're going to leave, and I'll send all that out to you in an email, okay? So if you would, please respond. Let me know if you're going to be able to make it. If you can't, we'll give you the information that we find out there, okay? All right, so moving on to the last thing here. Oh, one more thing before we get into this. I have a brochure that Dr. Warner, it's in there, yeah. Yeah, y'all can pass it around and take a look at it. Dr. Warner wants me, once we get through all these documents, he wants me to try to create some sort of positive marketing tool that we can hand out to developers or anybody that has questions about the land bank. It's going to include, if you look on that brochure, it's going to include a picture. Yeah, it's going to include a picture and just a 5-10 sentence bio of each commissioner. So what I need from y'all is, number one, a picture. Send me a photo. And number two, if y'all guys want to create your own bio, 5 sentences, 10 sentences, send it to me. Otherwise, I'll take what's on y'all's resumes or whatever that y'all submitted to the mayor's office and put something together for that, okay? And then hopefully at the next meeting, I'll be able to show y'all guys what it looks like and y'all can approve and give me your feedback, okay? So just send me a picture and a bio for that, all right? So the last thing, focus areas. So obviously, again, the mayor, and we've talked a little bit about focus areas. Getting into how it ties into our bylaws and everything. It says the commission will focus its limited resources on areas of the city that show significant signs of decline. Those signs could be high concentration of vacant structures, criminal activity, poverty rates, the least owner-occupied housing, or the ones that don't have the capacity of self-revitalization, right? And I took some pictures of some of the housing in some neighborhoods here in Jonesboro. Again, you're going to give priority once you look at your focus area. You're going to give priority to. We have a list. I kind of had to shorten my list a little bit just to put it on here, but you're going to justify bringing these properties in based off a number of avenues, right? There's existing liens on these properties. We're working with the homeowners association in that area, and they feel like they want to have a community garden, so we can bring in a vacant lot for a garden. Maybe it's tax delinquent. Maybe we got a private developer who wants to build a project in an area that nobody else wants to build, so we can go in and work with them on that. There's a list. Once we get these properties, and I think I'll start by saying this. I think I've mentioned in the past. Let's say you focus all on liens, and the question I think Ray asked at the last time, how do we know where to focus, right? And I said it's going to be a combination of factors. It's going to be a combination of city liens, undeveloped parcels, property donations, and then purchasing property for the land bank, right? And so, again, these are just examples that I'm showing y'all. This is by no means places that you have to focus your resources. What I'm going to recommend is I'm going to show you 2 examples, and then y'all guys go back to your areas in Jonesboro and you think about this information and how this information relates to areas of Jonesboro that maybe you've drove through or you've seen or you want to focus. And then maybe at the next meeting, we can talk a little more about identifying a specific focus area. But these next 2 examples, they're just examples, things that I pulled off my computer, trying to show y'all how we can use our different means of acquiring property and how that'll actually look on the ground, okay? So, Creth and Hope, or Creeth and Hope, by South Caraway, I believe, or South Patrick and McDaniels. I tried to blow that up as big as possible, but that's as big as it was going to get. So obviously you notice it's got some existing structures, some undeveloped lots. But taking it to the next slide, this is how it's going to look when we start making decisions. And again, it's a combination of liens, undeveloped property, existing homeowners, property donations, and rentals. That's what you've got in that block. The red, those are parcels that we've either condemned in the past and demoed the houses, or they're currently going through our condemnation process right now. The green, obviously, those are undeveloped parcels that we would have to acquire, either through property donation or purchasing. The blue, this is where maybe CDBG funding comes into play. If they meet the income requirements and if the money's available, CDBG funding is a good, unique way to partner with existing homeowners in a neighborhood to maybe rehab their houses or whatnot. And then the orange parcels, those are owned by an individual who lives in Texas. The one on the right that's in the actual square block, it's undeveloped. And based off conversations with that individual who wants to come from Texas and deal with a property that you have to mow all the time, right? So those would be good targets for property donations. And then obviously the rental properties, we can purchase them if we want to. I didn't highlight them with anything. And so that's how it's going to look on the ground. You say, how can we go in and we can change a block? How can we go in and change a neighborhood? Well, you're going to identify, you're going to tell me, hey, I want to focus on this area of town. I will go back to my office over the next month. I'll work on putting something like this together, and I'll reach out, I'll contact the owners, and I can provide y'all with that feedback. There is a chance maybe you set a focus area and there's no lanes in that area, right? Then you're going to be relying on other avenues of bringing property in. Does that make sense? Maybe it's property donation, maybe it's just purchasing it outright, what have you. And so each area is going to be unique in its own mixture of properties. Does that make sense? That's one area. And then here was the second one.
Hey, Jonathan, on that last slide, and I might have missed you saying, and I apologize if I do, what was the purple highlight?
The purple is, so obviously I took a screenshot on my GIS software. The purple is a private developer. I'm not going to go down the private developer road right now because we've not talked to them. We could or could not ever work with that individual. So the purple, I probably could have cropped it out, but that's why I'm focusing on that block to the north of that, which is property that, whether without a private developer, we can go in and acquire that, and then the staff and y'all as commissioners can go out and we can find a developer, right, who would want to build there. Moving on to the second part, this is in North Jonesboro. I forgot my pointer, but at the very top, right there is Success Schools. And so at the top there, that's Success Schools, and to the north is a park. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area or not, but what I put together, again, this goes back to each area is going to have its own unique way of maybe acquiring properties. What you'll see is there's not really a ton of liens in this area, right? There's only a couple. But there's a ton of rental properties. And so tying back into, if I can go back to this first part, there's one of our justifications, the least owner-occupied housing, right? So that's rental property. This area of town has a lot of that. We have existing homeowners that we can partner with, maybe create a neighborhood association, work with them, and create a plan, a neighborhood redevelopment plan that will allow us going forward to change how this area is perceived, or change how it looks, or change some of these vacant lots into developed properties. Any questions? There are two things, if there are no questions on this, there are two things that I want to point out when y'all guys start looking for focus areas or start thinking of potential areas in town. There are some factors that will restrict our ways of bringing in property, right? So for example, I was asked a few weeks ago about this area of town, West Forest, Woodrow, kind of North Jonesboro, Main Street, 1st, 2nd, 3rd Street, that area behind Rice, or not behind Riceland, behind the glass factory. And what you'll see here, I was talking with our engineering department today about this. The red is, I believe, the floodway, and the orange or yellow, whatever color you want to call that, is a floodplain. And so when you start trying to accumulate properties in this area, what you'll find is CDBG funding. I talked to them this morning as well. CDBG funding tends to shy away from flood areas. So when you start identifying this, not only will you kind of lose out on that aspect of it, which may or may not be an issue, developers are going to try to shy away from that as well, because they'll have to build it to, I think, a foot above the flood elevation, and there's whole other issues that go into that. So I would keep that in mind. That's one of the areas there's going to be flooding issues, is that section of North Jonesboro. Not saying that we can't purchase or make that a focus area, but if you do, we'll have to be creative and address those property acquisitions maybe a little differently than if we were focusing on an area such as By Success Schools or over here by Creeth and Hope. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and excuse me real quick. I think in the previous meeting, I think you said we need to make an impact. We needed to stay focused instead of spread out.
Yes, definitely.
So when you talk about an area that you're going to focus on, how big of an area are you? I mean, what are you talking about?
That is why I'm glad y'all are here, because that's not my decision to make. That's yours. Y'all guys,
in your opinion, from your studies, what does that look like? Is it
that
3 blocks?
is
Is it
a few blocks. Now, it depends. Little Rock, they have 2 or 3 blocks. They have obviously more land, more opportunity, a bigger issue of property abandonment. So they are able to literally take maybe 1 block, and they can grab 3 or 4 or 5 projects in that 1 block, right? So if we want to do that, then answering your question, it's 1 block. But I don't think that that's the way we need to go. I don't think we need to spread it out all over Jonesboro, but I think we can open it up to, maybe a certain area around a property, maybe 3, 4 blocks or 5 blocks, whatever y'all want to set. That's where I'm going to try to rely on y'all's expertise, and we'll set it as tailor it to Jonesboro, right? We don't necessarily have to use what Little Rock's doing. So
okay?
I don't really, to answer your question, I don't have a direct answer for you. We can work together on that, or I can set an area if you want me to. But
I think I understand what you're saying. I agree.
I don't want to set it to just 1 block,
Right.
and then us be really restricted on anything, right? Especially starting out. I know, and I had these conversations with Joan in the past, and Bill, the mayor even said, we want to go slow, we want to go slow. And I agree to that. If you're reflecting based off what Little Rock did, before Little Rock was ever at this point, they had already accumulated properties through the city council, and so they had a bank established. So they were able to go in and say, hey, we're going to focus on this 1 block because we've already accumulated through the city council process 4 or 5 parcels in this block. So they went and they focused on 1 block. We don't have that luxury. We don't have anything in the land bank. So where we want to be focused, we don't want to focus to the point where we're not able to accumulate property into the land bank and do anything. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, moving on. That's one of the flood areas I wanted to point out is North Jonesboro in that section. And then the other section was, I had a conversation about the old Nettleton area, and this is what the old Nettleton area looks like. So if you want to focus on the old Nettleton area, or if you want to focus on the area behind the glass factory on Johnson, you're going to have to come up with a creative way to convince developers to build in those areas, as well as limited funding mechanisms, right? Which gets back to that whole $1,000. I think we'll have a difficult time if y'all want to establish this as a focus area. I don't know. I mean, I think a developer would purchase it for $1,000, but it would make it easier to say, hey, if you'll build in this area, we'll be able to donate it to you, which might entice some people to go in there. I don't know. Any questions, thoughts? That's really all I have. I want to get y'all, I'm not sure what time it is, but I want to get y'all out of here as quick as possible. It's 1 o'clock, so.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Any other questions before we move on? We're good? If y'all have questions, shoot me an email and I'll get that information to you as quick as possible, okay?
Item 6, public comments, limited to 3 minutes per person. Yes, sir. If you,
Sir,
if you would,
you have to come up
approach
to
the podium, state your name and address.
3 minutes start yet? I won't take a minute. Darrell Cook, Jonesboro, Arkansas. You keep talking about developer, and from that last slide that I saw, and I'm sitting back here as a citizen thinking, okay, you're wanting to acquire a whole block. If you go back to your slide of Creth and Hope Street, those undeveloped lots, the reason those have not been developed, those lots do not meet today's building codes. And I'm a realtor for 30 years. I don't think y'all need to hire a realtor to sell your properties. I've made a living for 30 years being a realtor. Most realtors won't tell you that. Y'all got a unique deal here. You can list your inventory. There's 600 licensed agents that'll look at it. But instead of trying to acquire that whole block between Hope and Creth, you've got an R2 property here, which is becoming a dinosaur in Jonesboro. It's very hard to find R2 property, but it's a corner lot. No one has developed it yet because time you do your setbacks, you can't build on it. So you have a non-buildable lot. So what I'm gathering from what y'all are saying is you want to acquire that whole block to redevelop it. Is that the point of this committee?
That's one of the purposes.
Okay. Why not simplify it and change your restrictions to let someone develop that lot? Would that not improve it? Because that lot's been vacant for the 30 years I've been in real estate. It's R2. But you got 2 streets. So time you do your 2 setbacks, it's not buildable. So the red lot is condemned property. Now I can see where you could put them 2 together because it's condemned, so you already own it, right?
No, that we'll have to go. Let me answer the first part of your question.
Okay.
And I'll even ask that too. So where you're talking about changing, it's this lot right here, right?
Now down bottom right-hand corner,
That one.
you're showing that as vacant and undeveloped.
No, this one. Oh, this one. Or that one. Which one are we talking about?
Okay.
I think you're talking about this one, the one in the red. It's R2, it's a corner
Well, that
lot.
says Lincoln. You got green, it says vacant and undeveloped.
Oh, yeah, these that are green.
Right. And then that right-hand corner one, that's brown. What color? Is that supposed to be orange?
This one?
Uh-huh.
Those are rental properties right now.
Okay, so you
So
take
there
your
you go.
green one.
Yeah.
And if you do your setbacks on that lot, it makes that lot non-buildable.
Okay.
These guys, I'm a builder, these guys are builders, they're not gonna buy that lot because you can't build on it. So now, one time, the city of Jonesboro allowed you to build on a 40-foot lot. Why can't they go back and let people build what they built 100 years ago there? Because when you talk about affordable housing, if you could build that shotgun house there, make it all brick, and put that shotgun house on that 40-foot lot, it would make, I mean, just sitting here listening, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, y'all's motivation is to acquire that whole block.
Just an example. Here, let me answer your question. Okay.
Okay.
So to answer your question, why would we not just change it? We are not planning, right? We're not the planning commission. We can work with Daryl. Maybe that's something we consider. I think if we change something like that, it's going to impact not just our focus area, but it'll impact everywhere, right? If you change the zoning requirements to allow people to build.
Well, now.
As it
per
pertains to that, as
just
it pertains to that specifically, we don't need to change anything, because if we were to be able to get this green lot, get that red lot, and maybe even this one, or let's just go with this green one and the red one, we would own both parcels and we could replat it into a developable lot.
True.
We don't need to be changing zoning
I'm
and
not-
doing anything like that.
Okay.
We could replat, and that's the point where y'all guys, we're going to have to be strategic and very methodical in how we proceed, because what you're going to find is what he just pointed out. A lot of people are going to come to us starting off. We've had our phone ringing all the time. People who own property, who are paying their taxes on a piece of property that's not developable. And their question is, I want to get rid of it. I'm tired of paying taxes on it. And you're going to have that exact situation. This individual can't develop this lot because it's too small, so maybe they want to donate it to us. Well, we might not want to accept that donation if we can't get the adjacent property. Does that make sense to y'all? Because then we would be accumulating somebody else's problem.
Yeah, I think that, to Daryl's point, I think that what I see, and I don't know, is you coming in and saying, look, you can't build on this lot. I'll buy it for this if you'll let me do this and this and this. Yeah, I know, like in some cities, they'll give you different thing, but density points. They might say you got a lot that you can only build one house on, but they'll let you build two houses if you come in and say, I'll put cobblestone pavers and architectural shingles and gas liners up, whatever it is.
Right.
And you come in and say, all right, I'll give you more if you'll let me do this, but I'll build a nicer product than whatever. And I think that's a decision. We, at that point, say, well, you know what, he's trying to, well, so let's give him some room so he can do something with it. I think that's that's the way I foresee it, is
There's hundreds of lots, and you pointed out the one there by Drudge Ditch, well, behind the glass factory, where it's in the floodway, flood zone, Woodrow and all. There's probably literally hundreds of lots that are vacant. There's hundreds of lots that are vacant in North Jonesboro.
Yeah.
When they were originally platted, and at one time they had home sites on them. My question, I've been arguing this for years with MAPC, is at one time they were allowed to have a structure built. Why not make an exception to that and let them rebuild that same footprint? Because to my knowledge, there's some areas of town, if your structure is blown away by a tornado, you can't build back. And I've sold properties to people before, and I've had to disclose to them that, hey, if you buy this from me and a tornado comes through here, you can't build it back, and to cover my liability. And that was one of my questions, because what y'all are doing is wonderful, and I think this will help Jonesboro tremendously. But maybe y'all could influence someone to piecemeal, because there's somebody in this town that would build on that lot if they could. Because
I know there are. It's just a matter of getting the administrative, connecting all these, making them into developable lots.
right.
And to address the other questions about the planning commission, and on all that stuff, obviously Daryl's here. We're going to work with planning pretty closely. We'll probably even go before the planning commission with a few of our requests, whether it's a rezoning or a conditional use or whatever that is, and we can work with that. I can't answer on behalf of that, but we can only work with what we have now, right? And what we have now won't allow for 40-foot lots or whatever. So we'd have to go with a creative way of changing that, which would be replatting, acquiring enough property to make it into a developable lot, or doing what Ray suggested, working with planning again to maybe change, if it's a small lot, put one house on there, or, density points or whatever. But those will be questions. That'll be stuff that we get into a lot farther down the road when we're actually getting ready to develop and acquire property. which is why we're trying to take this a step at a time. But yeah, we'll be getting into those questions a lot more in depth in the future when it comes to developing and approving the sale of property and stuff like that.
Thank you. Any further public comments, concerns? Have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion to adjourn by Dennis, and do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion adjourned.